So now I'm just going to go through jams and jellies, and I'm going to sort of talk through the process because I can't do a demonstration, but this is sort of a demonstration by PowerPoint. So jellied products, jams and jellies, these jellied products are characterized by having a low water activity and a low pH. So what that means by low water activity is that water activity is a measure of the available free unbound water. And so that water that's available, if it's not bound, it's available for bacteria to utilize. So by creating a low water activity product, we're preventing bacteria from having the water that they need to live and survive. And we are potentially taking that away from them. Then the low pH prevents Clostridium from growing. So our concern with jams and jellies is really usually yeasts and molds. So that low water activity will inhibit microbial growth because the water is bound in a gel and it's now unavailable for the bacteria to use. And jellied products traditionally have a water activity of about 0.80. Water activity is measured on a scale of 0 to 1, with 1 being water, pure water. pH is a measure of acidity, and jellied products typically have a pH below 4.6. So usually around 3, in the low 3 range. So traditional jelly recipes rely on low water activity because they have a lot of sugar added, a low pH and heat treatment to prevent any harmful bacteria from growing. And this will also prevent yeast and mold spoilage. Molds that produce toxins in your jams and jellies, if you see mold, you need to throw your jam and jelly out because they can send shoots down into the food and produce toxin and you won't necessarily see it. So it's because it doesn't have a low enough water activity where you can just sort of cut the mold off and salvage the rest of the food. If you have yeast and mold in your jam and jelly, you want to throw it away. There's also low sugar recipes, which, are really popular these days because, people try to monitor some of their sugar, especially if they eat a lot of it. And these low sugar recipes rely on a different pectin, which allows for the jam to still solidify without having as much sugar added to bind all the water. So you still have a low pH and you still have the heat treatment to prevent harmful bacterial growth. And you still have the potential for yeast and mold spoilage. But the shelf stability might be reduced due to higher water activity, meaning that there's less sugar in these low sugar recipes. So therefore, there's a higher amount of water that's available for the bacteria as a result of less sugar. So jams and jellies, there are essential ingredients for jams and jellies, and this includes sugar, fruit, the acid or the pH of the recipe, and the pectin. Essential ingredients, so sugar, this suppresses microbial growth by lowering the water activity. It also sweetens the product. It helps set the pectin. The sugar aids in color retention and improves texture of the fruit. So while some of the sweetness from the jam and jelly comes from the fruit, some is also added from sugar. So when you use a low sugar pectin, you can use less sugar. You can use no sugar, but you can use less sugar as well. So it's just something to be aware of because the full sugar recipe has a lot of sugar in it. But that may be your thing, and that's totally fine. Another essential ingredient is the fruit. In addition to providing the color and flavor profile, the fruit also provides some pectin. It's abundant in the flesh of apples, but some fruits like strawberries have lower amounts of pectin. So you usually add pectin to the recipe. The fruit also provides, the acid. The fruit is acidic food. So it provides essentially the acid of the recipe. Sometimes jams and jellies call for a little more lemon juice to be added. And this might help achieve the pH needed to set the pectin. So while some fruits are higher in acid, others might need some lemon juice to be added. If you're using lemon juice, you want to use commercial lemon juice that has a standard acidity of 5%. Fresh lemon juice may not have that standard acidity. The acidity of fresh lemon juice might vary. So it's recommended that you use commercial lemon juice. And here is just, there are different pectins, as you can see here, the real fruit pectin on top. Wait, which one? The real fruit pectin, it looks like regular. I thought it was the regular one, but it might be the low or no sugar pectin. I might have a double low, no sugar pectin picture here, but you know, it's just an example of a type of pectin that you can use. There are other types of pectins, but pectin is important. It combines with the sugar, water, and the acid to form that gel that we want when we're making a jam. And water bound in the gel is unavailable to bacteria. The highest quality pectin is in just ripe fruit, but sometimes, you know, some recipes call for additional pectin to be added. Commercial pectins are available in powder and liquid forms. They are not interchangeable. So if the recipe calls for a liquid pectin, you need to use a liquid pectin. If it calls for a powdered pectin, obviously use a powdered pectin. And as we talked about, there's a different type of pectin if you want to do something with a no sugar or less sugar. So when you're making a jam or jelly, you know, you want to make sure that you wash your fruit and your fruit with cold running water to, you know, rinse off any bugs and whatnot before you get started. And make sure you're examining and washing your jars. Keep the jars hot. Follow manufacturer's instructions for treating your new piece lids. You no longer have to boil them in water like it's shown in the picture here. You need to make sure you have a rack in the canner and fill the canner with water. You want to make sure you have 1 to 2 inches over the jars and keep a boiling pot of water nearby in case you need to add water. When you're preparing your recipe, make sure you wash your hands, wash the produce, and follow the approved recipe. And when you're doing everything, you can sort of do it in a process. You know, ladle the food into the hot food into the jars. Make sure you leave the 1/4-inch headspace. You know, run a plastic knife or something plastic around the jar to remove any air bubbles and adjust the headspace if needed. Wipe the rim of the jar. You can just stick a paper towel in the hot water if it's not too bad and just use that. Place the lid on the jar and then secure the screw band finger tight. So like I said earlier, the water temperature is about 180 degrees Fahrenheit when it's simmering. You want to make sure you place the jars in the canner using the jar lifter. Keep the jars straight up. Add more boiling water and then wait for the water to come back to a boil before you start your timer and cover the canner. And then lastly, you can, once the timer is up, you can turn off the burner and remove the lid and leave the jars in there for an additional 5 minutes. This helps the lid to just seal a little tighter. Remove the jars after the 5 minutes and don't tilt them. Place them on a clean towel or plastic or wooden cutting board and don't move them for 12 to 24 hours. And then when you store them, you want to take those screw bands off because they are highly likely to rust. You may need to wash the rims and the bands. Don't store with the screw band on. Label your jars, record batch on process records, and store in a dark, dry, cool area that doesn't have extreme temperature fluctuations.